Thank you, Paris and Talia Williams, for the violin duo. I would like to ask you to please stand for the arrival of His Excellency, the Governor of South Australia. Please sit. That was short.女士们、先生们，下午好，我叫诸葛亮，浪漫诸葛亮，欢迎光临阿德莱德语言节，谢谢。His Excellency, the Governor of South Australia, Vice Chancellor of the University of Adelaide, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Gilad Zuckerman. I am Endangered Languages Professor at the University of Adelaide, so endangered that I'm the only such professor in Australia. I greeted you in Chinese because one of the reasons I decided to establish the Adelaide Language Festival was an incident that happened to my Aboriginal friend and to myself in a bar in Australia. We were having Irish cream, Baileys, and we saw two local people talking about two Chinese people who were in the bar as well. And my Aboriginal friend and I heard the following sentence. Look at these Chinese people. They come to our country and they do not even speak our language. I don't need to tell you how my Aboriginal friend felt when he heard this sentence. I would like to invite Taylor Tipu Power Smith. She's a Ghana woman, to welcome us to your country, Tipu. Tipu means spark, as in fire spark. And I guess that Taylor is called Tipu because her mother is Gadlabina, which means fire lava. Tipu, please welcome us to your country.
Nankana miuna kaunu alia napudla alia yungan dalia yakan and dalia kuma. Nanari Taylor Tipu Power Smith. Yalaka ngai pane ngai chul taikatina pirako wangandi. Ngadlu gana miuna kama mi pa yama yama ngai cha mankolankala yacha mianaku. Ngai chai ngadli waratia kati, matu ichanga, ngai chul kama mi, ngai chai kuma, ngai chalya. Ladies and gentlemen, uncles, aunties, brothers and sisters. My name is Taylor Tipu Power Smith, and Tipu, like Gillard said, does mean spark, and I was given that name after my mother, Katrina Garlabina Power, which means the lover of fire. Today we are meeting on sacred Ghana land. We pay our respects to all the Ghana that are, all the Ghana that were, and all the Ghana that will be. We pay our respects to all of our elders, both black and white. I would also like to acknowledge and pay special respects to two idols of mine who we recently lost, my dear Auntie Alice Rigney and my dear Uncle Steve Goldsmith. These warriors paved the way for me and so many others, and it's because of them that I even have the courage to be standing up here in front of you today. They were heroes in their own right, and even with the odds stacked against them, they accomplished big things, and I'll forever worship this sacred ground that they walked on. Warabana Ghana, let Ghana be spoken. Pop, Rob, my grandfathers, grandmothers, aunties and uncles have worked tirelessly to wake up our sleeping language, and it's up to me and my generation to keep it strong so that we don't let their hard work and sufferance be in vain. So please embrace our Ghana language and share it as much as your heart's desire. Let us sit and talk together. Let us eat and drink together. Let us sing and dance together, and let us laugh and cry together so that our children and our children's children can feel the wind and the breeze, find shelter in the storm and sunshine in the rain. But most importantly, so that they can feel the warmth of a new campfire that we have created for them. Mani ngā budni Ghana yartana. Welcome to Ghana country. Nakara.
Thank you, Tipu. It is a sheer pleasure to call upon Professor Mike Brooks to introduce His Excellency the Governor of South Australia. Mike Brooks is a man of vision. He's a leading international researcher in computer vision and image analysis, but he's also the leader of our university. He's the interim Vice Chancellor and President of the University of Adelaide. Mike Brooks.
Thank you so much, Gillard. I stand in awe of your linguistic prowess, and I'm sure this is an audience of remarkable capability in that sense too. His Excellency, the Honourable Hugh Van the Honourable Reverend Dr. Lynn Arnold, great friend of the University, many distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. You have a very warm welcome today in two senses, of course. Number one, because it's 38 degrees outside, and number two, because the University of Adelaide is delighted to welcome you here. We are enormously pleased you could join us today at the Adelaide Language Festival 2017. And thank you so much, Taylor, for the welcome to country. I must say I love your name, Taylor Tipu. It's a beautiful name. Founded in 2014 by Professor Gillard Zuckerman, Professor of Linguistics here and Endangered Languages, as you heard, the Adelaide Language Festival is a celebration of diversity and promotes understanding and the multiple benefits that come with learning more than one and hopefully many languages. The University of Adelaide has had a long association with languages as an education and intellectual pursuit. We make many languages available through our Diploma of Languages, including, in conjunction with Flinders University, French, German, Italian, Spanish, Mandarin, Modern Greek, Indonesian, and Japanese. Adding language to a degree gives our students increased skills to help secure their future careers, and I certainly have a concern about the state of Australia in terms of its linguistic prowess as a whole, and we need much more people capable in this area. We're particularly proud that the university is today able to bring such an array of languages to the wider public with the support of the Languages and Cultures Network for Australian Universities. For bringing us this wonderful festival, thank you, Professor Zuckerman, Emeritus Professor Jean Fornaciero, and Sarah Reid also, and the many others who've put in a lot of hard work across the languages community to give their expertise and make this happen. It now gives me great pleasure to welcome His Excellency, the Honourable Hugh Van Ley, Governor of South Australia, to introduce the festival. And I must say, His Excellency is someone we take enormous pride in South Australia. His Excellency is Adelaide's greatest ambassador for multiculturalism. He's also a tremendous friend to the university, as I mentioned, and I'm proud to say one of our graduates. He was born in central Vietnam and arrived with his wife Lan in 1977. And if ever you get the opportunity, and I don't know whether you will today, to hear of his arrival here, it is inspirational and very moving. He earned a degree in economics and accounting, as well as a Master of Business Administration from the University of Adelaide. And from 1991, he worked at the Australian Securities and Investments Commission, where he led many high-profile matters. He also served on many community boards and committees, in particular those relating to diversity, the arts, and education. A characteristic of His Excellency is enormous generosity and giving. A former chairman of the Multicultural and Ethnic Affairs Commission, His Excellency served for several years as the Lieutenant Governor of South Australia before his appointment as Governor of the state in 2014. He is the first Vietnamese-born person in the world to undertake a vice-regal position. In June 2016, His Excellency was also appointed as a Companion of the Order of Australia for services to the community in South Australia. It's a great pleasure to welcome His Excellency, the Honourable Hugh Van Ley.
Well, thank you so much for that very generous introduction. Thank you, Professor Mike Brooks, and thank you very much for your warm welcome. I'd like to start by acknowledging, of course, our interim Vice-Chancellors of this and the President of this university, my university, Professor Mike Brooks, the Honourable Reverend Dr. Lynn Arnold, a former Premier, former Minister for Education, and now the Reverend of the Anglican Church, Professor Gillard Zuckerman, the founder and convener of the Adelaide Language Festival, Professor Emerita Jane Fornaciero, President of the Languages and Cultures Network for Australian University, all the distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Gana, Miyuna, Gana Yata, Ngatlu Timpandi, Ngai Wankari Manina Putni. That's a Ghana language, and literally translated as, we recognize the Ghana people in their land, and I say it is good that you all come. I acknowledge that we're gathering here today on the land of the Ghana people, and we respect their spiritual relationship with the country, and I thank Taylor Tipu for this welcome to the country. Well, thank you for your kind invitation today to this wonderful festival. Ladies and gentlemen, as we know, human beings are wired to learn language. We cannot think without it. I like to think of the human brain functioning like a symphony orchestra and to think of our language like music. Language rings the bells of the senses as much as it turns the pages of our mental dictionaries. We are wired for language, and the latest research indicates that we are wired by our language. Understanding a language is key to understanding a culture, for when we understand a language, we are also understanding the thinking, the culture, the custom behind this language. This is incredibly important for the societies such as Australia. And I am so pleased that this festival has found itself a home in our beloved state and in our beautiful city of Adelaide. As we know, Australia is an incredibly diverse community that has welcomed people from more than 200 cultures, backgrounds. Collectively, we speak more than 250 languages. Nearly 50% of our population, almost 1 in every 2 Australians, were either born overseas or having at least one of their parents born overseas. This proportion is by far the highest in developed countries in the world, including USA, Britain, Germany, France, and Canada. 20% of our population speak another language other than English at home. Besides those from the large and well-known migrant communities, you will find people in South Australia from places that vary at Afghanistan and Argentina, Cambodia and Cuba, Madagascar and Mexico, Ukraine, China, India, Nepal, Bhutan, and Uzbekistan, and many, many more. I'm told that many of you have come here today so you can get a taste of some languages spoken in these places and learn to speak a few words. I thank you for showing such an interest in the linguistic diversity of our community. By learning each other's languages, we can engage with each other and across distances. And we can learn to respect differences and diversity in the knowledge that variety creates strength. And we can connect with people in ways that create harmony, peace, and prosperity. Now, ladies and gentlemen, as the Cold War came to an end, we saw the globalization escalated to an extraordinary speed. To date, more than ever, the world has become so closed, and in many aspects, and in particular our communication with each other, is in any part of the world require very little effort. It is borderless and almost effortless. As such, languages are increasingly playing an important role on humans' interaction and integration. There are also an important requirements to expand or to reach out either by ourselves individually or as a society and as a country to the world. My vision for Australia is that we become a truly multilingual society. I like to see our students learn not just one other language, but 2 or even more. I like to see our students provided with a strong foreign language education in our schools and then use these skills to travel overseas. I dream of a country where every student is expected to study overseas, schools and universities, or at least spend significant time abroad. Because in addition to supporting our young people to prosper on the global stage, studying another language will also help them to become more informed and empathetic as Australian citizens. And with this in mind, I congratulate Professor Gillard Yuckerman, the chair of the Endangered Languages at the University of Adelaide, for it being inspired to create and organize the first Adelaide Languages Festival in 2014, and which is heard. As a free public event, it attracted widespread support and highlighted the richness of our state linguistic and cultural diversity. 3 years later, we now gather for the second Adelaide Language Festival. In recent years, there has been great concern that many of the Aboriginal languages are gradually disappearing, and I'm especially pleased that this festival is focused on the work being done to sustain and revive Australia's Indigenous languages. I'm pleased to know that today's musical performances will highlight many of the other languages that feature in the cultural history of our state, languages such as Korean, Welsh, and Gaelic. And as I alluded to earlier, the festival offers crash courses in 20 different languages, including some from China and Russia, Middle East, and Europe, Asia, and Australia, of course. I do hope that today's activity inspires people to pursue their language studies further. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, I thank Professor Gilad Yuckerman and his team for staging this festival and extend my best wishes for a very successful event. It is with great pleasure I declare the festival open. Thank you.
Would you please stand for the departure of His Excellency, the Governor of South Australia? Thank you so much, the Governor, for your wonderful words. Please be seated. Another reason for establishing the Adelaide Language Festival was my understanding that some Australians regard a person with a foreign accent as if he or she has a kind of a disability. Well, in fact, when someone has a foreign accent, what it usually means is that he or she speaks perfectly at least one language other than English, which is a huge benefit. Accents are wonderful in my view. Inigo Montoya was a character in the 1987 film The Princess Bride, directed by Rob Reiner. He said, "Hello, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die." Just imagine had he had a British accent, like, "Hello, my name is Indigo Montoya. You killed my father. Would you please kindly prepare to die?" It doesn't work. You need a foreign accent. Siobhan, in Irish, Siwan Owen, is a Welsh-born Australian with a wonderful accent. She's an Aussie, but she has kind of a Welsh tilt, or she's a singer and harpist with a unique style that blends her ethereal soprano voice with heart-wrenching Celtic lilts. Siobhan performed in the first Adelaide Language Festival in 2014 before she became world famous. So we got her before that. Following her performance 3 years ago, I have been suffering from Ohrwurm. Do you know what Ohrwurm is? It's a German Ohrwurm, Ohrwurm, Ohrwurm. You see, German did not only give us Schadenfreude and Blitzkrieg, it also gave us Zusammenleben and Ohrwurm. Ohrwurm is like an earworm. It's when you continue to hear that music in your ear, like when you go to sleep, and it has been continuing until today, 3 years from then. Is Siobhan here? Where is Siobhan? Siobhan, I've never told you that. The earworm is something like pam 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 finque 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 tinta 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 tinta. It continues in my ear. Now I asked my friend Oliver Sacks, who actually died unfortunately in 2015, whether there is a solution, and he told me you need to listen to this angelic voice again. And this is why I invited Siobhan for the second time, and she agreed. Siobhan, please, a Breton song now and later. Siobhan is going to give you a Celtic delight that will happen at the end of our sessions here in Welsh, Manx, Irish, and Scottish. But now, Breton, Siobhan Owen.
Wow, what an introduction. Thank you. So yeah, I'm Siobhana and I was born in Wales in a very small town called Llanfair Pwllnell o Garach yn Robert Llantysilio Gogogoch. But now I live in Adelaide, which is a lot easier to say. And I'm going to be singing a Breton song for you now. It's Breton, Cornish and Welsh are all part of the same group of Celtic languages, which is Brittonic. So this is An Inia Garon, One Day, My Love.
Siobhan Owen, thank you. I think this is for you, Siobhan. There were some bells. You're allowed to have a tear when Siobhan sings. It's so moving. A linguist, a priest, a politician, a company director, and a premier walked into a bar. "My name is Lynn Arnold," he said. The Honorable Reverend Dr. Lynn Arnold, AO, FAICD, is one of the most versatile people I have encountered. and consequently one of the busiest people around. Lynn served as Premier of South Australia at the beginning of the 90s and led World Vision from 1997 to 2007 and Anglicare South Australia thereafter. In 2014, he was ordained as priest at St. Peter's Cathedral, the beautiful cathedral in North Adelaide, where you can find him almost every Sunday. His love for languages has taken him all over the globe, for example, for his PhD on Asturiano in Uvieu, also known as Oviedo in Spain. Today, the Honorable Reverend Dr. Lynn Arnold, AO-FAICD, will enlighten us about the virus of language. Ladies and gentlemen, and non-specifics, Lynn Arnold.
Naina mane. Nadlu tampendi ganama yuna yurta matanya wamatada nyako. Ganama yunako yutako taikaringa tawila. Panaka tapapuruna bulcha yalcha kuma nadlu panadlu wadlu toiletina mankoriadlu. Nadlu tampendi ramanjeri naranjeri anangu atnamatna nuranga. Miyuna kumala yalara mani nabudni yancha imbarendi Ghana yatanga bilyanina yatanga. Which, with the approval of Ghana elders, I have wished to say, we acknowledge the Ghana people and their spiritual relationship with the land as the traditional custodians of the Adelaide region. We acknowledge their living culture, heritage and beliefs. We also acknowledge the Naranjari, Ramanjari, Anangu, Adnamatna, Noranga and other peoples here today and welcome them to this meeting on Ghana land. May we walk together in harmony in the spirit of reconciliation. Thank you, Taylor Tipu, for your welcome to country. And thank you, Gilad, for your beautiful introduction, very warm and glowing and over the top. Thank you to the Governor for his words, and he said so much of great power. I particularly took out the phrase, we are wired for language, and we are wired by our language. There's a lot in those two statements. Linguistics over the past couple of centuries has explored the relationship of contemporary languages to the languages of yore. The particular field is called evolutionary linguistics. In this context, the term genetic relationship refers to the relationship that exists between languages that are members of the same language family. August Schneider in the 19th century was the first to compare changing languages to evolving species. He developed the theory of an evolutionary tree, the Staumbaum theory. In the absence of fossil records, the field fell off the linguistic research radar for a century and a quarter before reappearing in 1988 and then in 1990 being popularized by Steven Pinker and Paul Bloom with their paper Natural Language and Natural Selection. Subsequently, there has been a flourishing of interest in the evolution of language, even leading to its own jargon, Everlang. Some of the research in this field has taken the perspective that there may be an actual relationship between genetic evolution and language evolution, even to the extent of speculating about such things as language predisposing genes that may be related to linguistic diversity, including the idea that something called the FOXP2 gene in our DNA might be considered the grammar gene. I hasten to add, however, that there is as yet little widespread support for such a proposed causality between actual biological genes and language development. To my mind, a more reasonable approach would be to consider genetic evolution as analogous to language evolution, and that it is the processes of each that bear comparison rather than the fundamentals. Thinking about this for my topic today, that's why I chose the virus of language. Now, when I first came across the term the virus of language, It actually came from, well, at least to my knowledge, from William Burroughs in his book, The Naked Lunch, written in 1959, where he actually spoke about language is a virus from outer space. And he had it as a somewhat polemical point of view, that he felt that there was the possibility that language could be an imposed and a negative in the way civilization developed. But I'm not taking it from that point of view entirely. I'm taking it both from a positive and negative point of view. So what is a virus? Certainly it is something that has been surrounded by bad press, but is some of that just fake news? The definition of a virus, according to the Australian Linguistic Bible, the Macquarie Dictionary, is, number one, it's a submicroscopic infective agent, inert outside of a cell, but able to reproduce within the host cell. Or, it's any disease caused by a virus. Or, in an obsolete sense, it's the venom of a poisonous animal. Or, it's a moral or intellectual poison, a corrupting influence. So virus, a language as a virus, the virus of language. Now, three of those four definitions are certainly negative, but I'd like to consider for the moment the first, namely that a virus is nothing more or less than a submicroscopic infective agent, inert outside of a cell, but able to reproduce itself within the host cell. And I think this definition parallels language very successfully. A virus cannot self-replicate. It needs a host to do so. That is exactly the same with language. Language cannot self-replicate. It needs a host to do so, a speaker, a writer, a thinker in the language. To emphasize the point, the characters on the Rosetta Stone, the hieroglyphs on the pyramids, or those on the Mayan temples, have never reproduced themselves. They stay static through time. Because of the inability to self-replicate without a host, we've sometimes mistakenly spoken about dead languages. But here again, language is more like a virus than a living form, such as a bacterium. A bacterium can die. It can be no more. It can be like the parrot of Monty Python fame. This parrot is no more. He has ceased to be. He's expired. He's gone to meet his maker. He's a stiff, bereft of life. He rests in peace. His metabolic processes are now history. He's kicked the bucket. He's shuffled off his mortal coil, run down the curtain and joined the bleeding choir invisible. This is an ex-parrot. Now, all of this can be said not only about parrots and bacteria, and even all of us, indeed all living things, but it cannot be said about viruses, nor can it be said about language. Viruses outside living cells don't replicate, but they don't die either. Give them a living cell and they are back in business. So too with language. Consider the case of Hebrew. It had remained inert for over a millennium in a spoken sense. And then, on the 13th of October in 1881, a Lithuanian who was studying in Paris, Eliezer ben Yehuda, began speaking in Hebrew to his friends in what is believed to be the first modern conversation using the language. Now, to be fair, Hebrew is in a category of its own. Wikipedia states that there are no other examples of a natural language without any native speakers, subsequently acquiring several million such native speakers, and no other example of a sacred language becoming a national language with millions of first language speakers. Well, that may be, but an essential point here is that a language that wasn't spoken now is. Professor Gilad Zuckerman prefers to use the idea that languages fall asleep and can be awoken rather than that they die and hope for resurrection. Here in South Australia, we have wonderful examples of sleeping languages being awoken. Ghana, right here on the Adelaide Plains, a resurgent language, and we've had Taylor Tipu today speaking to us in Ghana, His Excellency the Governor likewise saying some words in Ghana. A resurgent language following the pioneering work of the late Dr. Alicia Rigney, whose special memorial service was held in this very place. Her work that is being followed on by an impressive cohort of language lieutenants that she inspired, people like yourself, Taylor Tipu, people like Jack Buckskin, now teaching in the Ghana language, and many others. And teaching it not just to be an ornament of our culture, but a communication means. In other words, a vital and a viable language. And of course, there are such other more recent efforts as the recuperation of Bangla on the west coast that Gillard is actively involved with the local community. Returning to the idea of virus, viruses do mutate over time, provided they are within a living host. Likewise, spoken languages change when there are speakers to change. Some viruses are of the RNA, ribonucleic acid type, resulting in unstable change, while others are of the deoxynucleic type, resulting in a more stable change. Likewise, some language change is unstable and doesn't last long. Language fashions come and go. Think of the words we used to use a decade ago or 20 years ago that you just don't hear anymore. While others are more durable, leading ultimately to new languages descendant from earlier forms. We know of Romance languages descended from Latin. Going further back, we know that Latin itself descended from a group of languages we refer to as Indo-European. And there are speculative theories based on the certainty that there must be parent languages to Indo-European and its sibling languages, such as Uralic and Altaic. Pushing the family tree back has had some, such as Holger Pedersen in 1903, speculating about a Nostratic macro-family, from the Latin term nostratus, fellow country people. And before that, some hypothetical ancestral language called Proto-Nostratic. If we don't quite know what is before something, we just add the word proto on it, and it seems to answer all the problems. That would have been spoken, Pedersen suggested, about 12,000 years ago. Of course, Jerry Altman in The Ascent of Babel acknowledges that this earlier time has to be much earlier than 12,000 years ago, because that is long after the arrival, for example, in Australia of Aboriginal peoples. So this proto-language that might have been there, from which all languages may have come, would have to have been there 100,000 years ago. What has taken place that a language of today is descended from, but incomprehensible to, a speaker of its ancestor language? Language evolution or change? This change can take forms not dissimilar to viruses. Firstly, viruses are capable of mutation. But then also, viruses are also able to change through interaction with other viruses. Sometimes they may collaborate by sharing genetic material, and at other times they may compete, with one defeating another. Viruses change through mutation or a process called recombination, where genetic material from another virus in the same environment is gained. That is where they can be considered to collaborate with one another. Now, virus mutation sees its parallel in language mutation. Words change both form and meaning over time. And if you only have to go back and look at old English texts to see how much many of the words have changed. I won't go into a long list of such words, but it's interesting that one word, our word for night, not as in day and night, but the person riding on a horse with a lance, such as Lancelot, the K-N-I-G-H-T takes its origin from Knicht, C-N-I-H-T. Now that is an example both of form change and meaning change, because originally it meant a boy or youth or servant, before it came to mean Lancelot and his co. As to meaning change, consider our own words in English, awful and terrific. Awful is awful, and terrific, well, terrific's terrific. And yet the earliest dictionary citation for terrific in 1667 said it was causing terror. A century later, it took on the sense of simply great size or intensity, of terrific size. And then in the 1800s, it took on the modern sense of an enthusiastic term of commendation. Amazing, impressive, excellent, exceedingly good, splendid, said the Oxford English Dictionary. As an aside, meaning change is not always homogeneous. A reader to a blog, in other words, it doesn't always happen at the same time. and hence we can have certain difficulties. A writer to a blog wrote, oftentimes older Irishmen would use the word terrific in describing a tragedy such as a terrific storm. My Polish uncle, the writer said, used to relate a humorous anecdote of trying to compliment his Irish immigrant mother-in-law, future mother-in-law, by telling her the meal was terrific, which was not understood. There was much confusion, hurt feelings, explanations, and apologies. In our own time, we have such a word as wicked, where it has parallel meanings. Not only parallel, it has tri-meanings. The wickedly good, the wicked as in evil, or the wicked as an insoluble problem, as in a sociological term. And awful to awful, full of awe to being dreadful. Other forms of change, this kind of recombination, the kind of bringing together, it comes in areas such as the creolization in languages. And we have examples of that here in Australia. In the northern part of Australia, we have Creole. We also have, in a dependency of Australia, in Norfolk Island, Norfolk Talk. And Norfolk Talk is a Creole of old dialects of English, of Tahitian, and some Caribbean. It brings together a linguistic syncretization where different strands come together and merge themselves into one. It's not unlike what happens in other cultural patterns. There are such things as religious syncretism as well. My daughter, Annalena, who is here with us today, who has spent the better part of 2 years in Sierra Leone working over there, talks about the fact there is some religious syncretism of people who call themselves Christmas, followers both of Christianity and Islam. So we have this process of change can take place in a number of ways. Of course, sometimes it will take place by simply being one dominant virus kicking out another virus. And by dominant, meaning that it finds the ambience better, more suitable than the other virus has. Latin, for example, ceased to be a widely used language in writing when printing came in, because vernacular languages were able to make use of the invention of printing much more successfully than Latin was, because the readers of those vernacular languages were more numerous. And it was at that time that Latin ceased to have the significant influence that it had within its world. And that relates to the area that was a specialty of my thesis, and that is that if you're going to help recuperate a language, and my thesis was based, as Gillard mentioned, on Asturiano, then you need not just to look at some basic knowledge of the language, you need to look at the domains where it is going to be used. If it is not going to be widely used, then it will not flourish. And so other languages that are found to be more useful in the wider domains where we exist will end up winning the day. And so my thesis was about how policy could be looking at helping encourage the wider domain usage of that language, which is on the cusp of surviving or falling asleep. In the case of viruses, language viruses and other viruses, it's been said that those languages that have an army win. Those that don't become dialects if they survive at all. Now, there are positive aspects to viruses. The very fact that we think in language, and treating it in that sense as a metaphorical virus is surely something that is positive, despite what William Burroughs might have been suggesting. Imagine if we did not have the capacity to, first of all, within our own minds, turn feelings, emotions, sensations into something that we could communicate to somebody else. Imagine where we would be or not be. So the very fact that language is something that we developed over tens of millennia, 100,000 years or more, is an indication of just how important it is for us. The language virus, if I may use that term, gives both a capacity to express ideas, but dare I say, it also gives a capacity not to express them, to limit the expression. And that can be negative, but you know, it can also be positive. Let me read a poem. Children are dumb to say how hot the day is, how hot the scent is of the summer rose, how dreadful the black wastes of evening sky, how dreadful the tall soldiers drumming by. But we have speech to chill the angry day, and speech to dull the rose's cruel scent. We spell away the overhanging night, we spell away the soldiers and the fright. There's a cool web of language winds us in, retreat from too much joy or too much fear. That poem was written by Robert Graves, called The Cool Web. It was written in 1927. He was still recovering from the traumas of World War I. And for him, the incapacity to express by language all the horror he encountered was a kind of protection. It was a kind of situation where he could file away in the deep recesses of the unconscious that which could not be expressed because it was beyond the capacity to express. So, language can give us the capacity both to express and not to express. Of course, viruses are not all the same, neither too are languages all the same. That's obviously self-evident. However, neither do all viruses have the same impact on a variety of hosts, nor do all languages. There is, for example, the issue at what stage a language is learnt. A study done jointly by the University of Chicago and the Pompeu Fabra Universitat of Barcelona found, looking at the idea of what are there different ways in which you might address or think about or reflect upon a moral issue, an ethical issue, in different languages. If you're not sure if there's a bias that may be colouring an important decision, you might try it in another language, was their premise. And what they found out is that if somebody thinks through an ethical or moral issue in their first language, they will think it through with quite a strong emotional content. If they think it through in their second language, they will think it through in a more utilitarian way. And they did this by the trolley test, the trolley test of would you allow the trolley to keep on running if there's people who will die, and you make a decision as to which will be the easiest way to go. And they found that when people did that in their first language, they were more emotionally impacted. In their second language, they were more impacted by a utilitarian lens, a utilitarian view. Now, what that meant in that case is that, why might that be? And their suggestion was that, well, the first language is very often learnt as part, well, not very often, it is always learnt as part of family and culture. Whereas a second language is learnt in less emotional settings, such as the classroom. And therefore, emotional content can often be lost in translation. Now, there's been a related set of studies that have been done on the issue of where that could be a negative, but where it may also be a positive. The related studies have been done on the issue of mental disturbance. If people are encouraged to learn a second language and think through their problems in the second language, those imponderables, those immovables of their psycho-emotional architecture sometimes may not be carried through into the next language. In other words, they can leave the baggage behind. Now, that could be a very positive thing. But in terms of language learning, it also brings some very important issues for how one should approach a language. And the corollary here, especially given the focus of the last few days on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander languages, is how can we make sure that important elements of cultural learning don't get lost in the transmission, as learners of Ghana or other languages are able to continue learning the full power that was learnt by its L1 speakers, its first language speakers, in their family and cultural context. Viruses can change the nature of the host. They can, so can languages. And we know how language can change the nature of society. We don't simply have to go to false fake news. George Orwell in 1984 wrote a lot about that. Just one quote where a defender of this capacity: "Don't you see that the whole aim of newspeak is to narrow the range of thought? In the end, we shall make thought crime literally impossible, because there will be no words to express it." And one of the problems of language, especially in a monolingual situation, can be that confining down, the reductionism in the way in which a society might think, working against a capacity for its plurality of thought. The existence of other languages alongside make that a much harder thing to do. This brings, of course, the issue of translating, not so much a virus-related issue. And one example, I'm not sure if you've considered your own reading. We have a huge translation bias in the world today. Overwhelmingly, translation is from English into other languages, rather than from other languages into English. If you actually do the figures on it, it's much more for those of us for whom English is the first language, our language becoming translated into more and more other languages. And I ask you to think about the books that you have read in the last 2 or 3 years. How many of those books were translations of books from other languages into English, and how many of them were books written in the first language of English? There's also the issue of linguistic delay, and I came across an example of some research that was done in paleontology. And there was a significant discovery made in 1950. This is cited in the book Rebels, Mavericks and Heretics in Biology. And the discovery was made in 1950 and was published by Willy Hennig in Grundzüge einer Theorie von phylogenetischen Systematik. And it had no impact. 16 years later, a translation would be done into English, and then it would start to have a significant impact. This really invites the possibility that one virus can become so dominant that it stops the benefits that may be possible from other viruses from playing out their role. And so if we take this in the language metaphor, what do we do to ensure that we don't see that happening? And of course, the Adelaide Language Festival is just one such thing that is making sure that doesn't happen. To return to the virus metaphor, there's often uninteresting genetic material. We can see in any DNA code vast material. What's the purpose of that? We may have no idea what the purpose is. Well, language is a bit like that too, it seems. If I ask you to think about the top 10 most common words in English, just think for a moment. I'm not going to do a test and ask you. Think what they might be. The top 10 are, number 1, in a highly self-centered society, I, which, by the way, in my thesis into Asturiano, was not matched in Asturiano. The most popular pronoun in Asturiano was we, not I, but that's an aside. In English, it's I. Second is the, then and then to, a, of, that, in, it, my, with, and then is came in at 11th, and but came in at 20th. Now, all of these are function words. The average English speaker has, according to this article I was reading in the New Scientist some years ago, has a vocabulary of perhaps 100,000 words. I've been waiting to hear all of Trump's, but now more than 99.9% of these words are made up of content words, so naming of things or activities, verbs that we're doing things. But these account for less than half the words we use. So in other words, 1% of the words we use, 1% of all the words we know make up half the words we use. Now, what's the significance of that? Well, James Pennebaker, in The Secret Life of Pronouns, wrote that these function words, the words that are in the top 10 and many others like them, they are used at high rates while also being short and hard to detect. They are processed in the brain differently to content words. And critically, they require social skills to use properly. Function words are both short and hard to perceive. One reason we have trouble spotting their high rate of usage is that our brains naturally slide over them. We automatically focus on content words as they provide the basic who, what, and where of conversation. And I know that from my own experience with the Spanish language. My conversational Spanish was much better, much earlier than my written Spanish gained any level of expertise at all. And the essential problem came down that my failure to fully understand the function words and the way in which they work to hold together the content words in the formalities of that language was letting me down. And so often when we think about learning another language, we think about vocab, making sure we learn the lists of content words, when in fact an equally important part is learning the function words that go with that. Now, just finally, Niall Ferguson, in a book he has just written, The Square and the Tower, Networks, Hierarchies and the Struggle for Global Power, writes about our species should really be known as Homo dictius, network man, because to quote sociologists Christakis and Fowler, our brains seem to have been built for social networks. This brings us back to the theme of language. If our networks are to work, then our language must work for us. Our language must be a positive effect, not a negative effect. And our language to be a positive effect is less likely to be at optimal positive if we all just speak world speak, to quote Nicholas Ostler's term, but rather if we actually have linguistic diversity. The rich diversity of humanity is maintained by linguistic diversity, not by monotony. And that statement is a collective truth as well as an individual truth. It was one of the reasons why when I was Minister of Education, following the Smollett report towards a multicultural democracy, we introduced the LOTE program, Languages Other Than English, to actually spread out the number of languages that would be taught in our schools. And there was an amazing flourishing of those languages within the first 2 years. 2 years after the program was introduced in 1985, we had 20 languages being taught in primary schools and 16 languages being taught in high schools. We had 4 Aboriginal languages being taught, not Ghana at the time, of course, because it was still in the process of coming back with the establishment of the Ghana Plains School. We even had languages such as Finnish being taught in 2 schools in South Australia. And what that came down to was an understanding of where language meant something to those communities. They used that language virus to their best effect. Unfortunately, in subsequent years, some of that was lost, though some very significant institutions helped keep it, such as the Secondary School of Languages, the language programs of LOTE that still are happening in many, many places, and the programs that are happening at the universities and the like. But we need to get that back. And so the Adelaide Language Festival is an opportunity for all of us to sense just how rich a contribution different languages can make. And so it's been a great pleasure to have been invited here today to speak on the virus of language. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lynn Arnold. It was wonderful. It made me think about the fact that a language, after all, is a collection of lects. It's more like a species rather than an organism. And when you talk to each other, by definition, you have to accommodate and negotiate, and this is exactly what viral replication is like. So, in fact, there is no such thing really as language. It's an abstract ensemble of idiolects and sociolects and dialects and other lects. And this orgy of lects talking to each other is exactly what viral replication is like.
Before we start getting too far into orgies, but following on Gillard's comment, I would recommend you read Douglas Hofstadter's Surfaces and Essences, because he really builds on that point very powerfully about the analogizing process that we each do, and we each hear somebody else by that same analogizing process, and that becomes the language.
It's interesting that, Lynn, you've mentioned awful, there is awful and terrific. Actually, there is awful and awesome. You know, like awful as in very bad and awesome. When I left the University of Queensland, I had a farewell party and somebody wrote, you know, thank you for your, he wanted to say thank you for your tireless efforts, but he wrote thank you for your tiresome efforts. I think by mistake, it's kind of, you know, auto correction or something like that. And about what you said about the shift happening, so, you know, like LOL used to mean lots of love. And I had a student here at this university whose grandmother died, and she told me that the friend of her mother wrote her an SMS to her. She was an old woman. I've heard about your mother, LOL. So you have to be careful about this shift happening. Do you have one question for the Honorable Reverend Dr. Lynn Arnold, AOFAICD? Is this how you spell your name?
You have one question for Lynn.
For Lynn, yeah.
The one I just said just now. The one I just said just now is Douglas Hofstadter, Surfaces and Essences. He's the same guy who wrote Metamagical Themas and Gödel, Escher and Bach and Le Bontemps Moreau, I think, and another one I'm just forgetting. But this latest one is, he also wrote something about the nothing that is I or whatever. That's not quite right. But anyway, this last one is the one that's relevant to here.
Thank you. Anybody else? Oh, thanks. Thank you so much, Lynn. It's much easier to say Lynn. It's such a great pleasure to have you with us as a linguist. It's not always that you bump into a premier who is also a PhD in linguistics. You have to admit that. I don't know how many there are. I know there is a country, I think Moldova, in which the anthem is all about language, the entire anthem. I think it's Moldova, if I'm not mistaken, but it's just an anthem about the love for language. It's not the love for land or something like that, but a premier who is a PhD in linguistics is a rarity. Thank you so much. Lynn Arnold. I would like to mention that we have people who came to this festival from all over the globe. I want to give you some examples. Is Omi Hatashin here? Hatashin Omi. He came all the way from Tokyo, Osaka. Is Professor William Wilson here? He came all the way from Hawaii, and he's going to teach Hawaii on the 6th column. We have Brenda Muta from Arnhem Land. She's going to teach Yungu on the 3rd. She came all the way from the Northern Territory. We have Dr. John Jacon. Is Dr. John Jacon here? He's going to teach you later on. We have Rivka Niston from Perth. Is she here? Rivka, please show yourself. She came all the way from Perth just for this festival. We have Yehuda Kaplan from Melbourne, who is going to teach you Israeli or Hebrew. We have Dmitry Lushnikov. Is Dmitry here? Oh, Dmitry, thank you. And these are just but several examples. So people came from all over the world for this festival and also for El Sinau conference that was preceding this festival. And it was organized by Jean Fornaziero, who is here, and also by Sarah Reed, who was here. I would like now to go to Korea. Korean orthography is the only writing system that I have ever encountered that is not arbitrary. All the writing systems that you know understand what I mean by arbitrary. I mean, the A, for example, it has nothing to do with But in Korean, if you want, you can ask Ben Anderson about it in the Korean session. The letter actually reflects the place of articulation in the mouth. So you can actually know what the letter stands for according to whether or not you understand where you say k, n, etc. if you look at the mouth. So this is not arbitrary. Anastasia Calvert is going to come to stage and sing for us a Korean song, a modern Korean song. Anastasia, are you here? Thank you.
All good? Yep.
우리 집에 맨날 홀로 있어지 아버지는 택시 드라이버 어디냐고 여쭤보면 항상 양화대교 아침이면 머리맡에 멸사탕에 라면탕에 새벽마다 퇴근하신 아버지는 기다리던 어린날의 나를 기억하네 엄마 아빠도 누나 나는 막둥이 고염둥이 오날이 나를 기억하네 기억하네 행복하자 우리 행복하자 아프지 말고 아프지 말고 행복하자 행복하자 아프지 말고 그래 내가 너를 보내 다 너 보내 엄마 뵙고만 했으면 해 우리 엄마 아빠도 강아지도 이제 나를 바라보네 전화가 오네 나 어머니래 두루루루 아주 짜증지니 어디냐고 못 벌어 너는 안 되겨 영화대교 엄마 행복하자 아프지 말고 아프지 말고 행복하자 행복하자 아프지 말고 그래 그땐 나 어릴 때는 아무것도 몰랐네 그 다리 위를 끊어가는 기분을 어디서냐고 어디냐고 여쭤보면 아버진 항상 양화대교 양화대교 이제는 그대 기다리리 No, 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 no 기다리래 행복하자 행복하자 아프지 말고 아프지 말고 행복하자 행복하자 아프지 말고 그래 행복하자 행복하자 아프지 말고 아프지 말고 행복하자 행복하자 아프지 말고 그래
Thank you so much, Anastasia. Anastasia Calvert. Thank you. We will now move to the crash courses that are general. So we will have 3 crash courses, 3 languages. These languages were selected to reflect the land, the air, and the sea of South Australia. Let me explain. Ghana represents the land. We are on Ghana land, so we will learn 20 minutes of Ghana all together. Mandarin Chinese represents the air. China provides us with the highest number of international students who fly all the way from China to Australia, sometimes even leaving their own kids behind. French represents the sea. This is the submarines. We will begin with Mandarin, and please welcome Xie Bao Hui. Xie Bao Hui.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, just relax. This is just a crash course. It's crash time. I really appreciate Professor Zuckerman, the way he pronounced my name. As you might have noticed, it's different from the name displayed on the screen in order. In Chinese language, the surname goes before the given name. Of course, you can see Chinese name written with the surname falling behind, but we just want to be nice. Today the topic is if you can draw, you can write Chinese. As a language teacher, I'm often asked the question, this is the question, is Chinese language difficult to learn? This is pretty easy and pretty difficult question because there's no such thing as easy language. English is not easy, Japanese is not easy, German is not easy. Why a language is so much, because Chinese is so difficult, it's because Chinese language is so different. In pronunciation, for example, we have 5 tones. English doesn't have tones. So this is just one of the examples, and many people think Chinese language is so difficult to write because it's so different. Now, could you turn to the next page, please? So that's the question. The next page, please. Now, according to the Ministry of Education and the State Language Commission of China, there are 3 levels of Chinese characters in terms of writing. And used in everyday communication. Level 1 is the words that most commonly used in everyday communication, both written and spoken, and most of them are covered in primary and secondary education. That means if you finish secondary education in China, you will probably have learned most of the characters. The number of this level is 3,500. And the next level, level 2 languages, level 2 characters are more often seen in publications and written languages and formal documents. These are characters smaller in number and less in use. The number is 2,500. The next level, level 3, these are the characters more often seen in people's names and the name of places, and not very often in everyday communication. So the total number, as you can see, is less than 9,000. So you probably have heard about people saying you have to learn about 10,000 characters before you can use the language fluently. And you have to travel to China, spend many years there before you grasp the language. And it's so difficult to learn, and so and so. Today, I'm just going to talk about how the Chinese characters were created, and possibly if you can draw a picture, you probably will be able to write Chinese language. As a matter of fact, for many people who haven't studied Chinese language, you probably have already practiced writing Chinese before without knowing it. I'll explain it to you a bit later. Next page, please. Just to show you how the Chinese characters look like. This is the first 100 characters in the level 1 category. And next page, please. These are the top 100 characters in use, the most popular Chinese characters in use. In 2017, it's from a corpus developed by Tsinghua University. Next page, please. And this is the top 100 characters in the 1990s. As you can see, they're not very much different, except a few changes in order because, you know, the language evolution and the increasing use of internet and so on, so much, and so on. Next slide, please. So here comes the question: how many characters do Chinese use every day? So you probably think of how many Chinese characters do I have to learn before I can go to China without, hiring an interpreter. We'll have a look at the characters and the frequency, how often they're used. And the first one, so it takes only, this may surprise you, it takes only 500 Chinese characters to cover about 78% of everyday communication. So this is the number. And it takes about only 1,000 characters to cover 91% of our everyday communication, both in writing and the spoken. And the next level will be 1,500. You see, the next 3 levels, it doesn't really make much difference. It makes difference already when you have learned 500 characters. It made so much difference. And of course, you become an expert if you learn. You can become an expert if you learn 1,000 characters. Now, next page, please. This is a very practical question. How many characters do I have to learn before I can survive in China? This is a very bad question. Very, very bad question. I want to ask, so the good question is, how many characters do you have to learn before you can thrive in China? Because the University of Adelaide wants you to thrive. They don't want you just to survive. All right. Now, if you want to finish secondary education, to learn mathematics, Chinese are genius about mathematics, chemistry, literature, language, and physics, and so the vocabulary requirement will be roughly between 2,100 to 2,500. Like I said, most of the level 1 characters are covered in secondary education already. And how about read newspaper? You want to know what's happening around. So the number is 800. Some say, well, 1,000, but the number vary, no, not very much. So the minimum number, most people would agree, is 800 before you can read a newspaper. As a matter of fact, my son, when he was 2.5 years old, he started to read newspaper. You know, he grasped some of the main idea and look at the pictures. Obviously, he didn't know most of the characters, but he can tell me about some of the stories happening. Oh, I'm surprised. Well, he was 2.5 years old. Next level, how many characters do you have to learn before you can use the internet in China? A 2005 study on 6 gigabytes of a corpus of the word count 1.4 billion words shows that it takes only 158 characters to cover 50% of the internet content in Chinese. And it takes only 1,001 characters to cover 90% of the internet content in Chinese. So that may surprise you a little bit, right? Now, we have to eat. We don't eat. If we don't eat, we die. So you have to learn now 100 Chinese characters before you can go to a restaurant, read the menu, and take your order, and then place your order. And how about get a date? We just go to the next slide and see what's happening already in the Western world. Can you click the little speaker, please, for me? This is the translation of the fairy tale Sleeping Beauty. Oops. Sorry.
Oh, hello. Who are you?
I'm your handsome prince.
Oh, well, we'd better get married then.
The happy pair were married then, married then, married then. The happy pair were married then, long, long ago.
Now here you see the Chinese translation of this fairy tale. Like you can see, it takes only 10 characters. If you're lucky and capable of learning 10 characters, fairy tale can become a reality. Now let's go to the next slide, please. So the question remains, how many characters do I have to learn to write? Because anyway, the Chinese characters look so different from English because it's not alphabetic. English is alphabetic, like what you can see on the ABCD, and the Chinese. What about Chinese? The Chinese is just blocks of strokes. And you can see from the slide, you can see it's just all crosses and downs, crosses, downs, and put in a box, and you get a Chinese character. So how can I ever learn to write so many Chinese characters? 800, even 800 is too many, just too many for us. And if we go to the next slide, please. So let me share with you a little bit about my personal experience when I was learning English. Now, when I was learning English, we learned the letters, the consonants and vowels first. Well, there are lots of things in common, like the G is pronounced as G. And next one is H, pronounced as H. Now, this is in common, but when we come to the combination of GH, I was confused. Why is GH pronounced as F, like cough? And in some other words, like plow, it doesn't have a sound at all. I didn't understand. So when it comes to the word laugh, why it is pronounced as laugh instead of log? So this is what I did. I get a picture of people like this. Is not Professor Mike Brooks. This is no. This is not him. And this is from the movie Home Alone. So you get a picture. This is what Chinese learn language. We get a picture of the object, and then we transform it into something animated, like you can see the shape of the mouth, and then we further convert it into the shape of the word, like the laugh with two sides higher than the middle, like the shape of a smiley mouth. So this way I learned laugh. Okay, GH appear in the word laugh in such a shape. So when I later come across with words with the combination of GH, I know, well, it's possibility it is pronounced as F instead of a G. Now, let's come to the 6 categories of how Chinese characters are created. Now, here are the 6 characters. One is pictograms. Like I said, many Chinese characters are just like a conversion of a picture into strokes. And simple ideogram is just a further step of evolution of the characters. And this next step is a compound ideographs. It's just a simple, it's just a combination of several ideograms to make sense or to mean something more general, abstract idea or something like that. And the fourth one is phono-semantic compound characters. It's getting more and more complex. And the next level will be rebus, phonetic loan characters, and next level, the last one, is derivatives. We only have to worry about the first four because the last two mainly talk about how the Chinese characters are used. But in terms of creation, we only talk about the first four. Let me say something about the pictogram first. Next slide, please. Pictogram it conveys meaning through its resemblance to physical objects. There are altogether about 600 pictograms in Chinese language, and the most ancient pictograms are recorded in the oracle bones, dating back to 1,300 years ago, BC, not ago, more than 3,000 years ago. Like you see in the picture. Next slide, please. And later, pictograms were carved into bronze vessels, which were mainly kept in royal families, royal courts for ritual and sacrifice purpose, and recording chronicles, great big events, something like that. And next slides, let's have a very quick look at the evolution of Chinese characters, evolving from oracle bones to its most modern contemporary form. The first one I would like to introduce to you is, you probably don't know what it is. Some of you don't. Some of you do know. This is what is recorded in the ancient oracle bone, a circle with a dot, and later it was carved into bronze vessels, like in the shape of a very similar form. And its pinyin is its pronunciation is like 日, and its meaning is sun. A circle with a dot in it. Its regular script looks a little bit different, but you can see still a rectangular form with a short line in the middle. Please show it to the audience. Thank you. This is how 日, the sun, was written. Because we Chinese look at the sun and then we get a picture and then convert it into something. You might wonder why does it have a short line in it, a dot in it? It's the sunspot. The ancient Chinese have already observed the sunspot and recorded. And next one I'm going to show you is this. Do you know what it is? Later it was found in bronze vessels, and it's like this. It's very similar. It's pronounced as 人. Its pronunciation is 人, meaning man or woman, human being. And its regular script is very similar to what it was more than 3,000 years ago. It's just two strokes. Now, next slide, please. Now, in order to be able to write the word, the character 日, the sun, you probably want to draw a picture of the sun, or you want to have a more actual picture like this, with a black spot in it. And then you come up with the ancient form, and then you will be able to write the character. When you write the Chinese character 日, you're not only doing the strokes, but also have a mind that the Chinese have observed the black spot, the sunspot, more than 3,000 years ago. So, and you can start practicing your writing. This is the sun, this is the sunspot. And not only you learn how to write a character, but also you know what it really means. And next slides. And that's for 人. That's for 人. And you can practice writing 人, because 人's got, the man has got two legs. Next slides, please. Now let's do a bit of a quiz. Have a little bit of a quiz time. First of all, you have something carved on the back of a bone, turtle shell, 3 triangles, it's a landscape. There can be more. If you put them together, they can form a range, you know. And later in bronze vessel, we found a similar form of character like this. And its modern script, its modern form of writing is, and its pronunciation, shan. Now, here's the question, what is it? Mountain, you're so clever. You're so clever. Now, the next character, yes, this is how we write it. So now, when you write the character shan, you're actually writing 3 hills, making a mountain. And the next character, I have more confidence in you now. This is an animal. Oh, you're so clever. I don't have to. I can leave now. The next, so on bronze vessel, this is the first one is on the oracle bone. The next one is on the bronze vessel, and the common script is a little bit more difficult, more complex. Now, its pinyin, its pronunciation is xiang, and now the question is what it is. Yes, you got it right. It's elephant. You got it right. It's elephant. Now, even for such a complex, show the audience the picture, please. This is the elephant. Now, the top part is its long trunk, and you've got 2 eyes, you've got 4 legs. And what about the right part? What is it? It could be, he could be Dumbo, you know, with 2, he flies. All right, so you can start practicing the character. It's very difficult and complex. Yeah, but you can do it. Now, next, ideograms is the next level. Is the next level. If you see ideograms, character can be simple or compound. I'll just give you one example. Go ahead, please. Go ahead. Character pronunciation. This is E, right? Meaning one line, 1 stroke. Next, this is 2. Okay, next is 3 lines. Pretty easy, isn't it? What about 1000? Now, I have a story for you. I'll finish my presentation with a story. Once upon a time, there was a rich man. He has a very clever son. He had a son. He thought, one day he said to his son, "Son, let me teach you how to write." The son was very happy. Okay, good. Now, this is 1 stroke. This is 2 lines. This is 3. I got it. It's so easy. You got it? Yeah. Now, can you write a letter for me? Yes, of course I can. Now, could you please write a letter to my friend, Mr. Wan? Ask him to come for a visit. Now, his name is Wan, 10,000. Oh, can you do that? Yes, of course I can do. Now, the father left for his business, leaving the son at home, writing the letter. So, at the end of the day, the father came back and see, I want to see how well my son does. He went into the house and was shocked. The house was full of papers writing with lines, and his son complained, "Why did you have to have a son? Why did you have to have a friend by the name of 10,000?" Now, how to write a 10,000 must be a very complex word, isn't it? But 3 strokes, pretty easy, isn't it? Thank you very much.
Xie. Is it xie? Yeah, thank you so much. Xie Bao Hui. We are now continuing to French, and I would like to ask the following to come to the stage: Dr. Peter Poyana and Elena Christaki-Hedrick. They're going to teach you 20 minutes of French. Are they around? Yes, please, come around. Thank you.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to our presentation of the French language. My name is Peter Poyana.
My name is Eleanor Christaki-Hedrick, and I'll just say that I am a recent graduate of this university. I'm now working for the submarines, so that was a very fitting introduction, so thank you. If we could move to the next slide. So we'll firstly talk about the place of the French language in the world, which is called the Francophone world.
Next slide, please. Slide. Next one. Next slide, please. Okay. Can you go back one, please? Thank you. I must say before we start, this is a crash course. And little did you know that when you signed up for this session, you're going to speak a bit of French because, you know, what's a crash course without speaking? So we'll do a bit of speaking. We've got a song. We're going to show you a song in French. So I hope you're feeling brave. But before we do all that, I'd like to talk about the Francophone world, which is the result of 3 centuries of colonisation between the 17th and the 19th century. You can see that French is spoken on all of the 7 continents. It's spoken in Vietnam. It is spoken in Lebanon, in Egypt. It is spoken in islands in the Caribbean. The 2 islands are Martinique and Guadeloupe, which are islands that resisted independence, actually. So in the 1940s, they decided to remain French. They decided not to become independent. If you look at Africa, you'll see that no less than 16 countries are French-speaking. Most of those countries are now independent, but they decided, when they became independent, to retain the French language. They understood that it was an advantage to retain an international language, even though politically they were independent. In the Pacific, so closer to us, there are many islands that speak French. New Caledonia, French Polynesia, Wallis and Futuna are all French departments or territories in which French is spoken. French is even spoken in the Antarctica. If you look at the map, there's a little dot in the south, very much south, between Australia and Africa, and it is a French-speaking island.
So, Peter, I'd like to ask you, are there many people living there?
I'm glad you asked, Eleanor. How many people live in the Kerguelen Islands? There are 45, who live there in the winter and 110 in the summer. But on Penguin Island, there are 1 million pairs of macaroni penguins. And I take it that the macaroni penguins speak French and not Italian, as their name suggests.
I think we'll take all of the French speakers we get, whether they're penguins or humans. How many countries around the world are French speaking?
Okay, in total, about 30 countries around the world are French speaking. Not always as native speakers, most of the time as official language. So French is the official language and sometimes the native language of about 30 countries around the world.
So would you say then that French is a good language to learn if you plan to study or work overseas?
Absolutely, and we have.
If we could go to the next slide.
We're doing well. French is a language that many students choose because of the possibilities for travelling and studying overseas. Perhaps we'll look at the language rankings at the moment. Now, one thing that is interesting about the French language and possibly unique is that there are relatively few native speakers in French, but very, very, very many speakers of French as a second language. Now, if we have a look at the graph, we can see that French is spoken as a native language by about 76 million people around the world. And most of them live in France, so 65 million native language speakers are in France. there are 8 million native language French speakers in the Canadian province of Quebec. In Belgium, so this is the south of Belgium, in the region called Wallonia, there are about 3 million native speakers. And in Switzerland, in the western part of Switzerland, there are about 2 million speakers. So that is the totality of native speakers in French.
The next slide,
French is 17th ranked 17th ranked language in terms of native speakers.
Next slide, please.
Thank you. Now we'll just have a quick look at this graph where we can see on the bottom, French is 17th as an L1 language, in other words, a native language. And if you look next to that, it's 5th as an L2 language. That is a language that is learned most of the time in primary school or in secondary school. Most of the L2 is located in countries where French is an official language. So most of the inhabitants of those countries learn their own language, their dialects, their local language at home, and they learn French most of the time at primary school. So in all, there are 153 million learners of French in schools and universities. So, as you can see, there are relatively few native language speakers in French, but very many speakers of French who have learned French in schools.
Next slide, please. So we're hoping that this cohort today becomes the next group of L2 French speakers. And to start that journey, you'll need some basic expressions. So Peter and I will do a demonstration and then we'll get you to repeat. So next slide, please.
Okay, so we're going to do a little imitation of French. I must say, just before we begin, there's a lot of polite behaviour in French. They're the rules of knowing how to greet people, and some of these rules are embedded in the language itself. So we're going to be very polite with each other today. This is a little dialogue that we came up with. So we're going to go through it, Eleanor and myself, and then we're going to get you to try. So I'm François, and Eleanor is Françoise. Bonjour.
Comment ça va?
Ça va bien, merci. Et vous?
Bien, merci.
Enchanté. Au revoir, madame.
Enchanté. Bonne journée, monsieur.
Very nice.
Okay, got it?
Okay.
So if we can have this side of the room being François and this side of the room being Françoise. Okay, so François, let's start with you. François?
Françoise. Françoise.
Bravo. You've learnt your first words in French. Well done. The next slide, please.
Okay, now that our ears are ringing in French after that little demonstration, we'd like to talk about some of the interesting features about the French language. For example, in French, nouns must be masculine or feminine. They can't choose, there's no in between. They are either masculine or they are feminine. They can't be both. Table is feminine. Next slide, please. Table is feminine. Desk is masculine. Chair is feminine. Armchair is masculine. So the article, the definite article, la is the feminine article and le is the masculine article. So that is the way of distinguishing the gender of French nouns.
Sure, but I suppose that's not peculiar to French. Other languages like the Romance languages, Italian and Spanish, have the same construction. I think the sounds of French are more interesting.
Okay, Eleanor, what's interesting about the sounds?
If we could go to the next slide. Okay, so I have Miss Fran Fine up here. I'm sure lots of you remember her from the 90s. So when speaking French, you really need to channel your inner Fran Fine. So the French words often don't look how they sound. So if we take the word bonjour, which you all just learnt, you don't pronounce the N. The rule is that if there is a vowel before an N or an M, you make the vowel nasal without pronouncing the N or the M. So the N or the M essentially becomes silent. So in bonjour, you can hear that nasal O-N, but we don't pronounce the N. Another example we can see with the words le vin, le pain, and le train. So we can see that French is full of nasal vowels, and these aren't found in the other Romance languages such as Spanish and Italian. Australian English has a few nasal sounds like g'day, but it's much different to the French nasals. So if you want to get used to speaking French, as I said, think your Fran Fine and get your best nasal sound out. So we can hear the different nasals in the sentence up here. Un bon vin blanc. So we can see there we've got all different vowels making the same nasal sound.
Good, thank you, Eleanor. That explains why French speakers seem to grunt a lot when they speak French. I'd like to talk about the mute E's. Next slide, please. French contains a lot of E's that are not pronounced. They are written but not pronounced. For example, France, in the word France, the final E is not pronounced in general spoken French. In the word Amérique, the final E is not pronounced. It's a mute or silent E. Sometimes the E drops off words like je crois, I believe. We drop the E and we pronounce je crois. But an interesting feature of the French language is sometimes the mute E returns. It comes back. And this often happens in French song. So we've chosen a song this afternoon that you can listen to, and I'm going to ask you to listen for the mute E's that are pronounced, especially at the end of words. Can we listen to the song, please? Just relax, sit back.
Right in the middle. Yep, there we go.
Il revient à ma mémoire des souvenirs familiers. Je revois ma blouse noire lorsque j'étais écolier. Sur le chemin de l'école, je chantais à pleine voix des romances sans paroles, vieilles chansons d'autrefois. Douce France, cher pays de mon enfance, bercé de tendre insouciance, je t'ai gardé dans mon cœur. Mon village, au clocher, aux maisons sages, où les enfants de mon âge ont partagé mon bonheur. Oui, je t'aime et je te donne ce prème. Oui, je t'aime dans la joie ou la douleur. Douce France, cher pays de mon enfance, bercé de tendre insouciance, je t'ai gardé dans mon cœur. J'ai connu des paysages et des soleils merveilleux au cours de lointains voyages, tout là-bas sous d'autres cieux. Mais combien je leur préfère mon ciel bleu, mon horizon, ma grande route, ma rivière, ma prairie et ma maison. Douce France, cher pays de mon enfance, bercé de tendre insouciance, je t'ai gardé dans mon cœur, mon village, au clocher, aux maisons sages, où les enfants de mon âge ont partagé mon bonheur. Oui, je t'aime et je te donne ce poème. Oui, je t'aime dans la joie ou la douleur. Douce France, cher pays de vos vacances, bercé de tendre insouciance, je t'ai gardé dans mon cœur, je t'ai gardé dans mon cœur.
Next slide, please. You may have recognized the singer. You must have seen him before, no? Charles Trenet. The song was written in 1944 during the war. It's a nostalgic song about the attachment to their country. I wanted to show that song to demonstrate the use of the mute E's at the end of the words. They're very, very pronounced. Douce France. And it's very interesting because French is a language which puts the stress on the final syllable in general. And when the final syllable is a mute E, and when that mute E is pronounced, that gives a very striking effect. Douce France. Je t'aime. So you've got that E sound, which is very, very close to the chest. And it expresses emotions very strongly, especially in song. The other thing I wanted to say about the mute E is that French is different from other Romance languages like Italian and Spanish, which are basically phonetic. Okay? The E's and the other vowels are always pronounced. But French is different from other Romance languages because of the influence of the northern languages that came into France from the north after the fall of the Roman Empire. So France, being a Latin-based language, became heavily influenced during the Middle Ages by Germanic languages coming from the north. And the Germanic languages are very heavily consonant-based. So that caused the vowels, in some cases, to disappear. And this comes back in song. This mute E, the hidden, the disappearing E, comes back in song. So just go through the words with you again. Douce France, cher pays de mon enfance, bercé de tendre insouciance, je t'ai gardé dans mon cœur.
So there we have some examples of an E that is not usually pronounced being pronounced for stylistic purposes. And I'd just like to add to Peter's explanation that if you travel to the south of France, you may actually hear the E being pronounced in normal speech, douce France, because of the influence of Spanish and Italian. So that just gives an example of the different types of pronunciations that we see varying from the north to the south of France.
Our crash course is over. We've looked at what makes French a unique language. We've looked at the nasal sounds. We've looked at the mute E's. And we have discovered the rhythm of French song.
Please feel free to visit any of these resources for more information, particularly the Alliance Française. You can easily become a member and access their huge library of DVDs, CDs and books. So I'd really recommend going there if you would like more information. Merci.
Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Peter, Elena. It was wonderful. I would like to, before our next crash course, which is Ghana, I would like to say a few thanks. Thank you. Firstly, all the volunteers, can you show yourselves to everybody? Are there volunteers here? Where are the volunteers? Oh yeah, the volunteers. Thank you so much, volunteers. I'm happy to announce that an anonymous donor will provide you with a book voucher at the end of the festival. Thank you so much. Also, I would like to thank the air conditioning technicians, whoever they are. Several years ago, it was not like that. It was very hot here, and you have to admit that it's wonderful. I would like to thank the Honorable Reverend Dr. Lynn Arnold for agreeing to do the keynote speech, which was wonderful, and in fact corresponded with what we've just heard about the Germanization of French, which obviously is parallel to the Frenchization of English. As you know, English is extremely influenced by French. I would like to thank Professor Jean Fornaziero, who is here. Please rise, Jean. We would like to see you. That's Jean Fornaziero. She's the head of ELSI now. Sarah Reed, I don't know if Sarah is here, but she has worked a lot, tirelessly. Italki for its sponsorship. Umikumu as well, the University of Adelaide Faculty of Arts, Flinders University, the Department of Education and Child Development, DECD, and finally the School of Languages and its principal, Lia Tedesco. Is Lia here? No, she went away, but Tedesco is a very good name for somebody who deals with languages because it means German in Italian. And she's from Italy, La Deutsche Vita. And finally, I would like to introduce you to Taylor Tipu Powersmith, whom you know already, and also to Dr. Rob Amory, who, as of 1st of January 2018, will be Associate Professor, Dr. Amory. Please congratulate him for the promotion. And now we have 20 minutes of Ghana. Tipu and Rob, please.
Can we have the next slide, please?
Mani Ngā Putni, welcome.
And that's a good thing for you all to learn. So let's try it all together. Mani, Na, Budni, Mani Ngā Putni. Well, we're going to jump right into it here. Ngadlu Tampandi, Ngadlu Gana Yatanga, Panba Pan Balyanindi. And we're going to say that. Now, with these big long words, Panba Pan Balyanindi, they look a bit daunting, don't they? But once we know how those words are constructed, and I find it's always a good idea to start from the end. So if we start with Nindi, which means becoming, and we go back a bit, Balyanindi. So let's all try it. Nindi,
Nindi,
Balyanindi, Pan Balyanindi, Panba Ban Balyanindi, and you've got it. In 3 seconds. Ganamiyana, Yai Chamatanya, Wama Tandanyoku. Okay, let's have the English there. Right, and this is a good thing for all of us. A lot of Ghana people have authorised, people like Lynn, the Governor, everybody, to acknowledge Ghana land, Ghana people in the Ghana language. Next slide. And yeah, we'll have all the things on this slide, thanks.
Ngā tipu warayu, ngā yaichananki, ngā Ghana wara Pinchandela, Wapila Inti Yaincha University of Adelaide. So I am Tipu, the Spark. I'm the second born female, an Indigenous woman, Nunga woman actually, and I work with KWP here at the Adelaide University.
Next slide, thanks. Ngai Rog Kudnwicha, Ngai Pindi Miyu, Ngai Wiradjuri Yatanga Yatua Piti, Ngai University of Adelaide Warpalayendi Kuma. So I'm the third born and male. I'm a non-Indigenous man. I grew up on Wiradjuri land over in New South Wales, Riverina, and I also work at the University of Adelaide here. Next slide, thanks.
So this is a map of Ghana Yarta, so Ghana country, and the outlined part is the Ghana native title claim.
Okay, next slide. So what we know about the Ghana language, almost all of it, was what was documented by two German missionaries, Clement Sherman and Christian Teichelmann, who arrived in Adelaide in October 1838. And they were actually young men when they arrived here. Clement Sherman on the left was 23 years old, Teichelmann was 31. And they worked with Ghana people like Gadlit Captain Jack in the middle, and Mulawera Borka, King John, over on the right-hand side, and a whole lot of other Ghana men as well. They produced this little dictionary and grammar here, about 2,000 words and a sketch grammar and quite a couple of hundred sentences in Ghana translated into English. Without their work, we wouldn't be able to say what we say today. Next slide. So revival efforts with the Ghana language began with the songbook project back in 1990. And we've come quite a long way since then. Next slide. Now, one of the things we might notice around Ghana country is all these names. Of course, people use a number of these names all the time, but they don't probably know that they belong to the Ghana language or what they mean. So the original name for Adelaide was Tandanya. Of course, we've got Tandanya Cultural Institute up the road here. And this word, Tanda, is the male red kangaroo. Not to be confused with Kulu, the female red kangaroo, or Nantu, the male grey kangaroo, or Wawi, the female grey kangaroo. We're talking about Tanda, the male red. And Ganya is rock, which is the name that Jack Buckskin has adopted for himself. So Tandanya, a contraction of Dandaganya, is the name for Adelaide. And Victoria Square is also based on this same word, Tandanyanga, the male red kangaroo rock place. The River Torrens, Garawirapari, Gara is red gum, Wira is forest, Pari is river. And this is an original name for the River Torrens. It was officially recognised in 2001 by an Act of Parliament through the South Australian State Parliament. Down there at Marion, in between Flinders Uni and Marion Road, we've got Wariparinga, the Windy River place. The Sturt River there is Waripari, the Windy River. Nganki Paringa, I hope you can recognise. Nganki, woman or female. Pari again, river. And that Nga, the place in Adoron. Patawilya is the original name for Glenelg. Pata being the swamp gum, Wilya being foliage. Gawandilla, I hope you recognise, in the north. Kangarilla, shepherding place. Nulunga, Nulu is the curvature or bend, so that's the horseshoe bend down on the Onkaparinga. Piltawadley, the possum home, Pilta, the brush-tail possum, Wadley, house or home, and this was the site of the native location down by the weir on the River Torrens. And it's down there at Piltawadley that almost everything we know about Ghana language, about Ghana cultural practices, was documented by those missionaries and others from Kaurna people. And Port Adelaide is known as Yatabulti, land of sleep or death. We don't exactly know why Yatabulti has that name, why Port Adelaide has that name. Kaurna Lewis believes that it might have something to do with those periodic fish kills that you get in the Port River down there. But there are also a lot of traditional Kaurna graves on both sides of the river there, so we're not quite sure. Next slide. So when it comes to Kaurna names, Kaurna people have a number of different kinds of names. Firstly, they have their Kangalta, their totemic name, their personal name. So Tipu would be a kind of Kangalta. And we know that Gadlitpina, Captain Jack, his Kangalta was Minnu, the golden wattle. We know that Mulawer Borka, King John, his Kangalta was Kua, the crow. We know other people had Nantu, male grey kangaroo, or Tainmunda, mistletoe, or Paicha, deadly snake, or even Kudmo, fog. They were names that were taken from nature. Next slide, thanks. They also had names derived from country. So King John, Mulawera Borka, derived his name from Mulawera, the dry forest, a tract of land down in the Wollonga foothills. And other Kaurna men drew their names similarly from places. Next slide, please. Kaurna people also had names that they derived from their children. Now, this is the inverse of what used to happen in English, where we've got Davidson, Robson, Johnson, etc., where people named themselves after their fathers. Well, here it's the other way around. So when Gadlitpina, Captain Jack, we can see from the form of his name that he must have had a child called Gudley, Dingo, and he's the father of Dingo. Ichamayatpina was the father of Ichamai, flesh, food, vegetable food, and so on. Next slide, thanks. And Kaurna people also had birth order names. Wandinari, I'm going to hand over to Tipu here.
You started off.
Well, me start off. Well, these are the names that every sentence example we have uses these names. The Kangalta, the totemic names, are a little too personal to use, so if you want to address someone, you use these. And we can all readily adopt one of these ourselves. We fall into one of these categories, I think. We've got Kaurna names up to 9. Anyone been to Bali? Yeah, and you'll notice that around Bali, Wayan, Nyoman, Ketut, Made, and every fourth person has got a name, Made or something. Well, they only have 4. Kaurna has 9, much more extensive repertoire. Anyway, we've got this Kaurna word, karikari, stand up. That's what we want you to do. So if you're firstborn and male, well, we'll have the males first. Oh, you want the females first? All right, have the females first. If you're firstborn and female, Katanya, karikari. Mani, tika. Firstborn and male, Karamiru, karikari. Mani tawari, tika. Tipu.
If you're second born female, you're warayu, so karikari.
Only the females. Mani tika. Third born and male. Kutnocha karikari. Mani, oh, we're getting thin now. Eighth born and male. Oh, we've got much smaller families these days than they used to have. Okay, let's move on. Next slide, thanks. Tipu.
Nina Mani?
Mani ai. Nina?
Mani?
Gillard, Panikawai. Niwamani?
Marty Ugly.
Jean, Panikawai. Namani.
Mani Adlu.
Marty Ugly.
Okay, well, you can see in Kaurna language it makes an important difference depending on whether we're addressing one person, two people, or more than two people. We have to change the word for you. These are the greetings we use these days, but in traditional times, instead they would say Wantinina. Wantinina? And they would answer Wadliana, going home or something. Or if it was two, Wantiniwa or Wantina, where you're going. Okay, let's have the next slide, thanks. Ngachalya?
So next we're going to learn a little song in Ghana is there an English translation of it or no? Which just simply means, hello, how are you? I'm good. Where are you going? And I'm going home. And it was a special song to Auntie Ours as well, of Auntie Ours, which she loved singing. So we're going to sing it nice and loud as we did here for her memorial as well. So it's really simple. So you could just repeat after me. It just goes, Nina Mani, Mani I,
Mani I,
Wantinina,
Wantinina,
Wadliana.
Wadliana.
Now we're going to sing it. So Rob, you sing with me as well.
You going to lead us?
I'm not singing by myself. Ready?
Nina Mani, Nina Mani, Mani I, Wantinina, Wantinina, Wadliana, Wadliana.
Maybe we can do it where we say Nina Mani and they repeat it.
Oh, okay.
How it's repeated, you know.
Okay.
So we do the first line, you do the second, repeated, all right? Loud.
Nina Mani, Nina Mani,
Mani I.
Wantinina, Wantinina.
Beautiful.
Mani Tawari. Okay, next slide. All right, back to welcomes and acknowledgements again. Maybe we'll skip this one. Let's go on to the next slide in the interest of time. Oh, before we move on, I'll just mention that in this very hall here, when Ngārapada Alicha passed away, it was our Premier, Jay Weatherall, who led the whole audience in singing that Ninamani song. And to my amazement, a lot of the audience knew the words and sang along with him, so that was wonderful. Okay, well, let's have a look now at a couple of interesting Kaurna words. The Kaurna word for scorpion, very graphic word, Gandawati. Now, wati is the tail, but gandu is lightning. That's a pretty good image, isn't it, of a scorpion, the Gandawati, the lightning tail. The word for crab, Tani Paicha. So Tani is surf, and Paicha is anything dangerous, deadly, vermin, something nasty. You've been in the surf when the crabs bite your toes? They're the Tani Paicha. And a similar kind of word is the mosquito, Kundi Paicha. Now, kundi was this bright red root that was eaten by Kaurna people, and we got this Paicha word again. So kundi Paicha, the mosquito, obviously it was a mosquito full of blood at the time. Let's have the next slide, thanks. Now, the missionaries documented this lovely term here, mi kuamati, which is ready-made for one of the main football teams here in town. May the Crows pick out your eyes. And a few years ago, we developed the counterpart, Kando Kundana, let lightning strike for the opposition. You know, these words were too violent for the AFL. They wouldn't let us use them. Anyway, we'll still use them. We're just not allowed to put it on their official posters or anything. Okay, let's have the next slide. So there's a whole lot of new words that Kaurna people documented documented, developed back in the 1830s, 1840s. So way back then, they had a word for keys. The nullity, the twisting thing. Biltity, the things for cutting through something. Tippugadla, the spark, tipple, your name again, the spark fire. Bandapudi, so that limestone and stone together, the powder and shot. Mimaki, well, maki originally meant ice. It was extended to glass because glass looks like ice. And you put it together with mi from mina, the I glass, the I ice, you get glasses. And the same with makitura. Tura was a shadow, also an image, and makitura, the ice image, the glass image, is the mirror. And so on. You can see there's a whole lot there. Next slide, thanks. And we've used those same patterns that Ghana people used way back then to develop new words, to develop a whole lot more words for terms that we need now. So mukandu is the lightning brain. Waraichiti, the phone, is the voice sending thing. Television, the image sending thing, and so on. But I think we're out of time. So let's move to the last slide, thanks. Keep going to the last slide. There, that'll do us.
So we say Ngaicho Yungantalya, Yaknantalya, or you can say it a bit more simply by saying Ngaichalya. And then we say Nakada, which means I'll see you later, so Nakada.
Nakada.
Ngaichalya, Rob and Tipu and Rob, thank you so much. We are now about to listen to Siobhan again for a Celtic delight. But before Siobhan, I just want to tell you something about what is going to happen at the end of the performance of Siobhan Owen. What will happen is simple. You're all invited to move to the Napier building. The Napier building is the ugly building there. It has 9 floors. You can just follow our volunteers. And at the Napier building, you have 6 possibilities in each session. I would like you to have a look at the up-to-date program. The up-to-date program has 6 columns, not 5. If you have a program with 5 columns, it means it's the wrong program. So please have a look at the 6-column table. And I just need to announce that one session will not take place. It's the Yungu session, which is on the 6th column on the right. It's just that Brenda feels unwell. Brenda is unwell. So, for example, at 4:45 sharp, you can choose between Latin, Israeli, Esperanto, Russian and Udmurt, Vietnamese and Hawaii. 6 possibilities. Then at 5:10 sharp, you can choose between Italian, Arabic, Indonesian, Kalasha, English as a foreign language as well, and Dinka from South Sudan. At 5:35 sharp, you can choose between Brazilian, Portuguese, Japanese, Pidgin Jara, Hungarian, Auslan, the sign language, and that's it. And at 6 o'clock, you can choose between Spanish, Korean, Klingon and Vulcan, German, Persian, and Gamilaroi, which is an Aboriginal language from New South Wales. I would like to tell you that each crash course will provide you with 4 things. Firstly, background, as we saw, so how many speakers, endangerment, related languages. Secondly, basic knowledge in language, like greetings, as we saw here. A unique characteristic. I remember when I studied Hindi, there was the word kal. Kal means both tomorrow and yesterday. You never know whether it's tomorrow and yesterday, only according to context. The same with praso or prason in Urdu. It means after tomorrow or before yesterday. It's like today plus minus 2. It's a very unique characteristic. Every language has a unique characteristic. And the final thing that you will learn is where to learn this language in Adelaide or online. So the teachers will let you know if you're interested, how can you continue. This is just an appetizer. Now, without further ado, if you have any questions, I'll be outside after Siobhan. Please note, we start at 4:45 sharp, and we cannot have an extension because of the domino effect. And you will learn about all the locations very simply from the volunteers. We have 6 locations you need to master. And now to Siobhan. Siobhan Owen, you already know her. Siobhan is going to sing now in Welsh, Irish, Scottish, Cornish, and Manx. Siobhan Owen.
Thank you. I'm actually going to go geographically. So I'm starting from the most southern country. We already heard Breton, which is the most southern country. I'm going to move to the Cornish one now. And just for the interest of time, I'm going to cut out a few verses of this. Basically, the story is that a woman had 9 brave sons, and each of them died. 3 of them died at war, 3 of them died at sea, and 3 of them died of illness. So it's a very cheerful song. This is Now Map Harth, 9 brave boys. Now map Colene Innan soethes an bludeno Telin gitern kimbal tolgora wibonen Marika bir an kenza krodasen Innan soethes an bludeno Treane da marwesiarth Kelsin cas for angledis in mordarth Innan soethesan bludeno Telin gitern kimbal tolgona ibonnen Marwika bir ankenza krodasen Innan soethesan bludeno Thank you. So this next one is moving up more north to Wales. This one is just a silly little folk tune about someone looking for their loved one. It's called Dakung Hariad, which means, there's my love. Dakung Hariad ilar ni bershan, durum diradlidlal. Una bauniana vahinan duram diradlidlal Dakur tia, dakur skabur, dakur drusi beidanakur Valdradlidlal, duram diradlidlal Dakur there when uch gang henog, duram diradlidlal Golug arni sutraserchach duram diradlidlal Miar hosavan echaskat nastang hariad dalvang hariad Valdradlidlal duram diradlidlal Dakur delen, dakur chanai, durum di rarum di raddle little laddle. Beth with queshep nebu chware, durum di rarum di raddle little laddle. Dakur veinwin hynus fanul, beth with neseb gaile meddwl, fel raddle diddle lal, fel raddle diddle lal, durum di rarum di raddle little laddle. Dakur veinwin hynus fanul, beth with neseb gaile meddwl, fel raddle diddle dal, fel raddle diddle dal, durum di rarum di raddle diddle lal. So this next one, I'm going over to the Isle of Man now. So this is in the language Manx. And this one is a lullaby about a little red bird. And they're asking, where did you sleep last night, little red bird? And the bird answers that they didn't sleep very comfortably. And then the last verse, they found 2 leaves to sleep between. And so they slept like a baby between 2 leaves, between 2 blankets. So this is Ushug Vegroi. Chadel mishreer Chadel mishreer azog me chad lich o trei. Chadel mishreer krau. Chadel mishreer azog me chad lich o trei. Chadel mishreer twin. Chadel mishreer twin azog me chad lich o trei. Chadel mishreer eder dech williag. Chadel mishreer eder williag. Mi reiken eder dech williag. So this next one is in Irish Gaelic, and I should have mentioned the three. So the Celtic languages are divided into 2 groups, and the Manx, Irish, and Scottish are all the Goidelic Celtic languages. So they're like the Gaelic languages. So this is in Irish now. It's about someone who was exiled to Scotland, an Irishman exiled to Scotland, and now they're reminiscing about Ireland and wishing they could go back. This is Ardi Chuin. Kasken ach nim fein and So my final piece for today is a Scottish Gaelic song. And this one, unfortunately, is another very miserable song. This one is apparently a true story that this woman, she wrote these words after her love died at sea. And one line in particular that I really love translates to roughly, if the seaweed be thy bed and the sand be thy pillow. So this is Ailen Doin, brown-haired Alan.
Thank you very much, Yvonne Owen.